Dear listeners, I have so much to tell you, and I often don't know where to start. It seems the world doesn't want to admit that sometimes we make mistakes and that sometimes the wrong person gets punished for something they didn't do. Not all of us have been personally affected, but many of us have been impacted by this reality. And I feel like it's my responsibility to share these stories with you and to tell you what I've learned about wrongful convictions. When we talk about preventing wrongful convictions, the focus often falls on defense lawyers, innocence organizations, or post conviction advocates. But what happens when the work of uncovering the truth comes from within a prosecutor's office? And that is the question that's at the heart of today's episode. Back in 2007, following a wave of DNA exonerations, the Dallas County District Attorney's Office made history by creating something entirely new: a conviction integrity unit. It was the first of its kind in the United States. This wasn't a symbolic gesture. It was a real commitment to accountability, built inside a system not known for admitting mistakes. Today, we're going back to where it all began, to understand how this unit came to be, what it was up against, and what we might take from it as we think about reform in our own jurisdictions. I'm genuinely grateful and humbled to have the chance to speak with James Hammond and Mike Ware from the Dallas Conviction Integrity Unit. What makes this conversation especially exciting for me is that we don't have anything quite like this in Canada. The idea that a prosecutor's office would have a dedicated unit focused on identifying and correcting wrongful convictions is, quite frankly, groundbreaking from a Canadian perspective. So I am thrilled to dig into how the CIU works and why it matters and what we can learn from it. So, welcome, Mike and James.
Thanks,
And
Kelly.
I'm hoping that we can start this conversation off just with a brief introduction of who you are and how you got drawn into this world of wrongful conviction work.
Okay. Well, I graduated from law school in 1983 from the University of Houston, and then returned back to my hometown of Fort Worth, Texas, to start my own criminal defense practice. And so I practiced criminal defense in Fort Worth, primarily in Tarrant County, for 20 something years. I tried quite a few death penalty cases. I mean, relatively speaking, two death penalty cases is quite a few, but but I tried a few more than that. I've tried misdemeanors, felonies, did direct appeals. Really didn't do that many um, collateral attacks on convictions, writs, as we call them in Texas and in the United States. But in, I guess, 2006, Craig Watkins got elected as the district attorney in Dallas County, which is the neighboring county. And, uh, and I think Dallas in Tarrant County have always had a rivalry, Dallas and Fort Worth. People think we're the same place, but we're very different. And there's always been a rivalry. And I think Dallas likes to consider themselves as our big brother or something. But we always hated going to Dallas County because they were so awful to us there.
Oh,
The district attorney's office was so awful to us and so arrogant. And it was kind of, the line, one of many lines was, well, you filed a motion for discovery. Well, go talk to your client. That's your discovery. Your client was there. That's your discovery. Go talk to your client, and then we'll see you in court. And I
wow.
mean, that was kind of, you know, uh, indicative of the arrogant attitude and et cetera. But the flip side, they had some very high profile wrongful convictions there. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Randall Dale Adams case, but historically it's very significant.
Okay.
It 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 inspired the documentary Thin Blue Line by Errol Morris, who was,
Yes.
in fact, he's actually a very well-known documentary maker now, but that was his very first documentary.
Okay.
And it started out being a documentary about a guy nicknamed by the Supreme Court, Supreme Court is Dr. Death, a psychiatrist by the name of James Grigson, who had Dallas County had him on their speed dial. So anytime they needed to get a jury to return a death sentence, they would, figuratively speaking, speed dial Dr. Death, and he would come in and very convincingly testify how this individual who maybe he had never even met, or at least met briefly in a 5-minute conversation, was worthy of the death penalty, because not only would they probably kill again, they undoubtedly would kill again. And so he
Wow.
started out making a documentary about Grigson and got hung up on this one particular case of Randall Dale Adams, who was on death row, came real close to being executed,
Okay.
and how this guy was obviously innocent, and made the documentary. Ultimately, Adams was exonerated in an opinion in 1989. So it was kind of kind of an early um,
Yeah.
opinion along those lines. And he wrote a book, Texas versus Adams, that I read. Of course, I'd seen the documentary, that was very influential on me. It's an excellent book, and which is all to say that in 2007 or 2006, when Craig got elected, and was not someone from inside the office. Traditionally, the Dallas DA's office, I mean, Henry Wade was the elected DA for, I don't know, 30 something years. I mean, he is the Wade in Roe versus Wade. Um,
Okay.
and he prosecuted Jack Ruby, or was involved in, he was the DA when Jack Ruby was prosecuted, Kennedy was assassinated, etc. And he, he was notorious. And during his administration, a lot of innocent people were convicted. Um, and in a way, the office was kind of proud of that fact, ironically.
Was
Um,
proud that innocent people had been
oh yeah, it was
convicted?
the saying. I mean, they never said this publicly, but they would say this in the bars. Anybody can convict a guilty person. It takes real talent to convict an innocent person. And
Wow.
now, I mean, like I said, that was said tongue in cheek and maybe
Of
after a few
course.
drinks, but it still is indicative of the culture. So Craig hired a good friend of mine, Terry Moore, to be his first assistant. And like I said, Craig was from the outside. Henry Wade's next two successors, worked under him and were, basically a continuation of his administration. And Craig was the first one to break that chain, if you will, and
Okay.
actually beat um, a guy that was the previous first assistant under the prior DA. So it was a big change to elect not only the first black man anywhere in Texas to be a DA,
Sure.
but definitely in Dallas. And I mean, this is in 2006, so it's not like we're talking about, you know, the 1970s or something.
Right.
And and he hired Terry Moore to be his first assistant. And traditionally, the way a first assistant works in a large urban district attorney's office is they actually do the work. They do the hiring, the firing, the HR stuff. They actually try the difficult cases, and and interface with the public quite a bit. And the elected district attorney, goes to the Rotary Club and makes speeches. Um,
Right.
I mean, that's a simplification, um, but I don't, but I don't think it's an oversimplification. Uh, and So he hired the right person. She was a good friend of mine, and she, came up with the idea. At that point, Dallas had had several DNA exonerations,
Okay.
and they were, of course, they were making headlines, and because they're all extraordinary stories.
Of course.
And they were DNA exonerations. But you have to keep in mind that these were gotten with a district attorney's office that was fighting them the whole way.
Sure.
So, notwithstanding the fact that the district attorney's office were fighting them, that in almost all cases, the local district judges will do whatever the district attorney's office tells them to do. So, if the district attorney's office is saying this guy should not even get a test, they're going to be denied a test and denied the opportunity to prove their innocence. But despite all of that, Dallas County was having them exonerations. And so Terry, being the brilliant attorney and justice warrior that she is, came up with the idea of a conviction integrity unit and called me and asked me if I would do that, if I would, leave private practice and come to Dallas and start a conviction integrity unit, which I'd
Wow.
never heard the term before because she had just made it up uh, moments
It
before.
has a great ring to it.
Yeah. And, I went over there in July of 2007. And, it was kind of, and this is just kind of an aside, and then I'll let Jim talk. We were all amused over in Tarrant County at watching what was going on in Dallas during this time. This African American man had been elected DA, and all the old administration, all the old higher ups, all the old underlings of the prior administration were fleeing the office. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
it's, I mean,
A
I hate
real
to
changing of the guard.
yeah, I mean, they were like the last days of Saigon when the helicopters were leaving the
Mm,
roof as Saigon was falling. I mean, they were that
sure.
panicked, I
Wow.
think, a lot of them. And actually some of the ones that stayed, Craig fired on his first day in office, I think.
Oh,
And
wow.
he's been vindicated in that those prosecutors, some of those have gone to other offices, and one was disbarred for misconduct in the other office he went to.
Wow.
So his judgment appears to have been sound in that respect. But anyway,
Spot on.
I'll let Jim talk.
Well, I had retired from suburban city, Richardson, Texas. My last 10 years, I spent most of it in investigations, either as an investigator, then I got promoted to sergeant and had to go back to patrol. And then my last 2 years as I was a sergeant in Major Crimes Division and Criminal Investigation Division. And so I came to work in the DA's office in 2005. I worked a couple other divisions. And then in 2007, I was in appellate and I was working these appellate cases. And, then the opportunity came to kind of segue into the conviction integrity unit, which I took because personally, as a longtime police officer, 30 years, when you, as a first responder, as a criminal investigator, as a supervisor over major cases, you want justice for the victim and for their surviving family members in case it was a murder.
Sure.
And if the wrong person is in jail, then those victims and family members never get justice. Plus, the real perpetrators out there committing additional offenses and creating new victims and victims' families. And so this was very interesting to me to, and humbling to be chosen to be a part of that unit.
I think you raise such an important point because I think a lot of times we lose track of the fact that exactly like you say, when the wrong person is put away, the true perpetrator, more often than not, is out there reoffending and continuing to offend and creating more victims. So a wrongful conviction has this huge ripple effect of how many victims are created by one wrong outcome.
Yeah, and in some cases, it's more than a ripple, it's a tidal wave, as in the case of uh, Stephen Phillips, where the real perpetrator went out to California and committed 28 other offenses.
28.
28.
So there's 28 additional victims created because of one wrong decision at some
Yes,
point.
yes.
Unbelievable. That's crazy.
Just for
Okay.
clarification,
Yeah.
I was on the unit from its inception through 2018, and then I got reassigned. So I've been with it since 2018. I know that the current CIU, some of their cases maybe take a little bit longer because most of the DNA cases have been, cleared up. So their investigations take more time now, but they still are actively, and they even, Judge Creusot even expanded the unit. Now there's more prosecutors and more two investigators instead of just me.
So I'm really curious how the CIU gets involved in a case. Are you investigating prior cases or are people writing to you to look into their cases? Or is there something that just makes your spidey senses tingle? How does this happen?
Well, I'd say all of the above, but the way we started in Dallas, because we didn't know where to start, we didn't have any template. No one had ever done it, is we did have a database of, I think, 54 cases of individuals who had asked for post-conviction DNA testing, who had been denied DNA testing,
Okay.
post-conviction DNA testing. Texas did pass a post-conviction DNA statute in 2001. And And since 2001, when we got there in 2007, so over a 6 year period, there had been that many who had applied, who had been turned down by the courts because the DA's office opposed it.
Wow.
Of course, the easiest way to avoid an embarrassing exoneration, which the DA's office considered every exoneration an embarrassment, so they fought them,
Oh my.
and is to fight the test to begin with, and they were successful in what we had a list of 454. So we started going down that list and looking at who really should have gotten the test. I mean, we didn't know if they were innocent or not,
Sure.
but there was the DNA to test. It had not been tested, and it would be dispositive of whether or not this was the actual perpetrator or whether it was someone else. So that's how we got started.
Wow. So there's a lot to unpack just in that. I mean, I think I was really taken aback when you said the courts or the DA sees the exoneration as a black mark or the request for a retesting as being contrary to what they want. And, you know, shouldn't really the goal be justice? And if, there's a chance that justice was not served, doesn't it make sense that everybody should be on board to have this done? And then the fact that there were 454 cases and those were all denied?
Those are the ones that had been denied. Yeah.
Unbelievable. I mean, and like you say, if there's the chance, if the DNA exists, I find it absolutely mind-boggling that these would be denied. What
But you
what
said,
reason?
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what reason do they have to deny like the retesting or the initial testing of DNA?
Well, I'll answer that question, and I'll let Jim, if he wants to, talk about the Patrick Waller case, which was the first case that we went back and retested, who had been denied twice a
Wow.
DNA test. But anyway, um, first of all, you said it makes sense, and then you followed something that, well, it
Oh
does
no, no,
make
I said
sense.
it doesn't make sense.
No,
Like,
you said it would make sense
oh,
for
sorry.
the district attorneys to want to find out who
Yes.
actually it's a well, you're right, it does, but there's so much about this that doesn't make sense. I mean, if I don't want to get into politics, but if the last, you know, 8 or 9 years have taught us anything, there's a whole lot that becomes institutionalized that doesn't make sense. That aside, Jim, you want to talk about Patrick Waller's case?
Well, Patrick Waller, he, was denied twice. And when we got the case and uh, we found out that, through DNA testing that, he was not the perpetrator, we were unable to actually file charges against the real offenders because in that interim time, the statute of limitations had expired. So
Oh,
had Patrick been granted DNA testing when he first asked for it, we could have prosecuted the real offenders.
wow, that's like an extra layer of injustice, right? Like,
Yes.
not only is the wrong person incarcerated, the right person is out there, but now we can't even seek closure in these cases.
And it was a very, there were actually two perpetrators, and it was a very violent multi-victim sexual assault case.
Unbelievable.
And so, it was a big deal. And actually the subject of its own documentary, or one episode of a documentary series done about our Dallas Conviction Integrity Unit. called Dallas DNA, and they did a real good job of covering the Patrick Waller case, as well as our identification of the actual perpetrators, catching them on camera, and
Sure.
and et cetera. So our 20 minutes about up.
It is just about up. It goes really quickly. And I was going to say, I feel like there is still so much to talk about with you. And I really do want to get into, what the CIUs look like today. So if you would be willing to join me once again, I would love to have you back for another conversation.
Sure, that sounds good.
Great. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Hearing how the Dallas CIU is built and the resistance they faced makes one thing clear. This kind of work takes more than good intentions. It takes courage, persistence, and a fundamental belief that prosecutors have a responsibility to correct past wrongs. Next time, we'll consider the state of CIUs across the U.S. nearly 20 years after their inception. Are they living up to their promise or falling short? And this may leave us all with questions around whether we could benefit from something similar here in Canada. And while today's letter may have piqued your interest, this is only part of the story. There's still so much more to tell. The effects of wrongful convictions are far-reaching. They touch us all. I'll write to you again soon as I continue my conversations with those whose lives have been impacted by a wrongful conviction. But until then, I remain wrongfully yours. And if today's episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it with others, liking and following the podcast on your favorite platforms so you don't miss what comes next. And as always, thank you for listening to Wrongfully Yours, where we believe that telling these stories is the first step towards preventing the next injustice. And until next time, stay curious, stay hopeful, and keep fighting for justice. If you have something that you want to talk about with me, or even if you want to just send me some words of encouragement, you can drop me a line at wrongfullyyourspodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out my website, kellylozon.ca, for more information about me and the kinds of things that I do.